On the morning of his daughter's 10th birthday, Daniel Whitmore found a small wooden box in the back of his late wife's closet, and inside it were 17 sealed envelopes, each one addressed to a birthday she would never live to see. He sat on the floor of that closet for almost an hour before he could bring himself to open the first one, because some part of him already understood that once he did, his daughter's childhood would never feel the same again. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Daniel had met Sarah Whitmore 11 years earlier, at a diner just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when neither of them had anywhere else to be. She was a schoolteacher with a laugh that filled a room, and he was a mechanic who had never once believed in the idea of falling in love quickly, until he sat across from her for 2 hours over a single cup of coffee that had long gone cold. They married 18 months later in her parents' backyard, under string lights her mother had spent an entire weekend hanging, and everyone who was there that day would later say they had never seen two people look so certain about anything in their lives. Their daughter, Ellie, was born 2 years after that, on a snowy December morning, and Sarah used to joke that Ellie had chosen the coldest day of the year just to make her entrance a little more dramatic. For the first 6 years of Ellie's life, everything about the Whitmore family felt steady in the way that only outsiders ever notice, the kind of steadiness people quietly envy without ever saying so out loud. Sarah taught second grade at the elementary school 2 streets over, Daniel ran a small auto shop his father had left him, and every Sunday the three of them drove out to the same lake to eat sandwiches on the same wooden dock. Nothing about their life was extraordinary, and that was exactly what made it feel so precious to the people who loved them. But in the spring that Ellie turned 7, Sarah began complaining of headaches that would not go away no matter how much water she drank or how early she went to bed, and within 4 months, the headaches had a name that neither of them had been prepared to hear in a doctor's office that smelled faintly of antiseptic and bad coffee. What followed was 14 months that Daniel still struggles to describe in order, because grief and hope have a way of braiding themselves together until a person can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. Sarah fought harder than anyone in that hospital had expected her to, and there were entire weeks where the family let themselves believe they had more time than they actually did. It was during one of those weeks, when Sarah had been given a rare afternoon of strength, that she asked Daniel to bring her the wooden jewelry box from her nightstand, the one her grandmother had given her, and to leave her alone in the room for a few hours with a pen and a stack of stationery she had been hiding in her hospital bag since the week of her diagnosis. Daniel never asked what she was writing. He assumed, at the time, that it was simply something private, a woman putting her thoughts down the way people sometimes do when they are frightened and looking for a place to put the fear. Sarah passed away on a Tuesday morning in October, almost exactly 4 years to the day since she and Daniel had first sat across from each other in that diner outside Asheville, and for a long time afterward, Daniel could not bring himself to open a single drawer in the bedroom they had shared, let alone the closet where her clothes still hung exactly as she had left them. He raised Ellie alone from that point forward, learning to braid hair from internet videos at midnight and burning more dinners than he cared to admit, and slowly, the two of them built a version of normal that worked for just the two of them. It was not until 3 years later, cleaning out the closet in preparation to finally repaint the bedroom, that Daniel found the wooden box tucked behind a row of winter coats, and realized, with his hands shaking, exactly what Sarah had spent those hospital afternoons doing. Each envelope was labeled in Sarah's handwriting with a single number, marking every birthday from Ellie's 8th all the way through her 24th, and Daniel understood immediately that his wife had spent some of the final strength she had left in this world trying to make sure her daughter would never spend a single birthday without hearing from her mother again. He did not open any of them that day. Instead, he called his sister, who had been Sarah's closest friend since college, and the two of them sat at his kitchen table until nearly midnight, trying to decide what a person was supposed to do with 17 letters written by someone who had known, with absolute certainty, that she would not be there to deliver them herself. They decided, in the end, that the letters belonged to Ellie and to Ellie alone, and that each one should be given to her on the exact birthday Sarah had written across the front of the envelope, unopened until that day arrived. Daniel placed the box in a fireproof safe in his bedroom closet, and for the first time since Sarah's funeral, he found himself looking forward to a specific date on the calendar instead of dreading it, because Ellie's 8th birthday was only 4 months away, and for the first time in 3 years, her mother would have something to say to her again. On the morning of Ellie's 8th birthday, Daniel handed his daughter a small envelope with her name written across the front in handwriting she barely remembered, and watched her face as she slowly understood whose handwriting it was. She read the letter 3 times before she said a single word, and when she finally looked up at her father, she asked him only one question, whether there were more. Daniel told her the truth, that there were 16 more waiting for her, one for every year until she turned 24, and Ellie hugged the letter to her chest and did not let go of it for the rest of that entire day, carrying it with her to school the following morning tucked inside her backpack like something too fragile to leave behind. What Daniel did not expect was how much those letters would shape the years that followed, not just for Ellie, but for him as well. Sarah had written each letter as though she somehow knew exactly which year would be hardest, offering advice about middle school friendships in the letter meant for age 11, and writing an entire page about heartbreak in the one meant for age 16, as though she had somehow been able to see around corners she should never have been able to see. Daniel began to wonder, and still wonders to this day, how a woman running out of time managed to write words that would land so precisely on the years her daughter would need them most, and whether some part of a parent's love simply knows, instinctively, what their child will one day have to face. By the time Ellie turned 15, the letters had become something the entire family looked forward to every December, a tradition that even Daniel's new wife, whom he had remarried 5 years after Sarah's passing, embraced without a hint of jealousy or hesitation. She understood, better than most people could have, that these letters were not a threat to the family they were building together, but rather a gift that made their family more whole, not less. Ellie often said that reading her mother's letters felt less like grief and more like a conversation that had simply been paused, one that picked back up every single year on the same date, in the same handwriting, filled with the same steady warmth that had defined her mother's voice. The 17th and final letter, the one addressed to Ellie's 24th birthday, sat in that fireproof safe for 16 years before its date finally arrived, and by then Ellie was a grown woman with a career of her own, engaged to be married the following spring. Daniel handed her the last envelope with hands that shook nearly as badly as they had the day he first discovered the box, and Ellie opened it alone, in the same bedroom that had once belonged to both of her parents, needing privacy for what she somehow understood would be the final time her mother's voice would reach her in this particular way. She has never shared the exact words of that final letter with anyone outside her immediate family, only that her mother had written about the kind of woman she hoped Ellie would become, and that reading it confirmed, without a single doubt, that she already had. Today, Daniel keeps the empty wooden box on a shelf in his living room, no longer holding any letters, but still holding, in his words, every single ounce of love his late wife had left to give. Ellie has since spoken about the letters publicly, hoping to encourage other parents facing the same impossible diagnosis to consider leaving something behind for the children they will not get to watch grow up, because as she puts it, grief may take away a person's presence, but it can never fully take away their voice. What began as 17 sealed envelopes hidden behind a row of winter coats became, over 16 years, a quiet reminder to an entire family that love, when written down with enough intention, has a way of outliving even the person who wrote it.